take that and do that to the best of our abilities. I wanted to just give a very quick update on where we are around arts pathways, because since we met last, there have been a couple of things that have come up with that, and I want to make sure everybody's clear about where we are with that. I want to first make sure everybody's clear about a few terms, because I think we've had some miscommunications about terms. A pathway basically consists of a set of 3 or more courses. And in no way are we saying that kids should not be engaged in the arts. Visual and performing arts are a critical piece, I believe, to our school culture and to kids being able to be fully rounded students. I have 2 that have gone through 6 years of orchestra and or band. The part that I want you to make sure that we're all clear on is, as you know, there was a pilot that was done this past spring that really revolved around a career-ready designation for students as they came out of high school, having taken those courses and having taken a capstone assessment. When that was presented to me, the results of the pilot, we found that there were basically 2 pieces that of the criteria that have been set around a career-ready designation, and that is that there was not a recognized, endorsed, or required by industry, and that there was the second criteria is written and verified by national or state industry, and those were found to not having been met. I will always operate from a position of being honest with students. I think if we're not honest with children, I think that we have become misguided. The other thing that was presented to me was when the career data was shared, students who completed this pathway, and for me, this is the part about being honest about students, or with students. If we say they are career ready, then they should be able to go get a career. And what we found was that a student can get a job for roughly $13,000 a year. And I could not in good conscience say you are career ready, but you're going to be under the poverty line. So what we did was we said this pilot, and then there was the other issue. The capstone assessment had roughly 55 students that took it. All 55 scored at the distinguished level. And that, you could say, well, that just means they were really good. It does, except for a significant number of them didn't even turn in everything and still scored at that level. So there was also a concern about the way that assessment was scored. So what I have charged the department to do is we are going to reboot. We're going to take another look at that. I have met with several members of the visual and performing arts community. And notice I'm using the right terms. You know, I have committed to them that we are going to do what's right. It's one of the things I'm excited about ESEA. We can actually move away from simply just, and I don't mean to insinuate that this is all Kentucky's done, but just as a national picture, to not look just at outcomes, but be able to look at the inputs of what goes into our system, and we can really do right by all the areas that make a well-rounded child. And so we are going to reboot that. We're going to take another look at it and see what is going to make most sense. I shared with them that I don't want to simply support the arts. We want to promote the arts. And that goes for not just the arts, but we want what's going to provide a student with a well-rounded education. So we are going to take another look at that, but I wanted the board to be clear about that. I'm almost done, Roger. I'm sorry.
We have a question.
Oh.
Are you, before you're going on to the science, are you going, could you also speak to the other part that was raised in this issue, which is the accountability that has this half point? I was reminded by some of our educators that when that first came out, I voted against the extra point for college and career ready for a couple of reasons. On the one hand, while you want to make sure all your career-ready students are college-ready, and so that's an incentive we actually built that into the career-ready as accountability. They had to have academic credentials in order to be even career-ready. There's also this difficulty of industry certifications, which is at the, Bob can attest, at the post-secondary level, too, of
Right.
what is, what really does have value, what doesn't. So this is, understand that. But arts isn't the only one in that situation. So
True.
the reason that I voted against it and some others had, and Bridget Ramsey had also raised the issue, was a concern about, in a desire to get more points with college and career ready, that students would be encouraged to do things that were not, that were college and career ready. I mean, so that even if they were in arts, maybe they were being encouraged to take something like, welding or whatever. So that's the only, if you could speak to that and
Sure.
what might be a plan for us so that we are not moving down that path.
Sure. And with all due respect, I think the intent of that was good, was well intended, but I think we also saw some unintended consequences. To me, again, this is where the excitement around ESEA comes in. I've told people that I'm going to put together a committee that I'm sort of tongue-in-cheek called the Gamer Committee, so we can look at unintended consequences. And I do think that at some level, when you do a system like this, sometimes some of that becomes more about the adults than the students. And I think that that's actually what we saw with in some cases. I don't want to make it sound like I'm being negative about our districts or anybody in general, but I do think that there were some cases where people were funneling kids into certain pathways because they knew they would get that extra point. I think that as we go into this ESEA reauthorization, we need, and this is why I say we've got to look at things that are going to celebrate the good things that are going on, as well as hold people accountable to ensure a level of equity. I think that we should have special awards for schools that are offering 80+% of their population visual and performing arts. I think we should have special awards that reward people for ensuring that our underserved populations are in advanced level coursework. So I think all of that is part of the conversation as we move into the new day with the new system. But I think that I do think that that's been part of the furor about this is I think from the visual and performing arts community, I think they have felt like this was an opportunity for them but in a what I think felt like a very confining structure. And I think on the other side it was people felt, well, this is a way I can put kids into this pathway and can get them through. Sometimes with the best intentions, sometimes not. So I think this is part of the conversation as we go forward is how do we reflect a quality education for every kid, meaning it's not just about math and reading. It's actually about the whole child.
And I would hope we'd have that extra point be part of that consideration, too.
Yeah. I mean, for me, everything's on the table. I think that we respect the work that's gone on. And as I told the reporter this morning, we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater because Kentucky's obviously made incredible gains. But at the same time, we have an opportunity to take that step back, look at everything that we are doing, and say, do we have evidence that this is actually moving us forward as a state? But most importantly, is there any evidence that shows children are being either benefited or perhaps harmed? And so how do we ensure that new system is really going to be beneficial? So I hope that helps.
I want to comment real quickly because I'm the one that was pushing for that half point at the time. And the intent, I think Commissioner's correct. The intent was, at least my intent, and I think those of us that voted for it at that time, was to offer some encouragement in the area of career and technical education because so much for so long has been, the emphasis has been on college and that there's other pathways to success other than a four-year degree. And that was the intent. Like a lot of things, going back to the early years of CARA, good ideas like ungraded primary and many other things not being implemented. based on those intentions. And I think there, obviously there's some concerns around this when you hear that you have 55 students who all scored distinguished on any kind of assessment. That raises a red flag. Or guiding students into that, knowing that the career opportunities are limited, raises some concerns too. So I have better understanding of the concerns, Mary Gwen, that you expressed and that Bridget expressed at that time, and respect that.
Chairman,
Yes.
on the arts piece, I just frankly have never felt like that the arts in this Commonwealth get the fair treatment that they should receive. And I go back to, I like to periodically go back and read something called the Rose decision. And the Rose decision has some interesting language in it that is worth me reminding myself. Some of the language says a child's right to an adequate education is fundamental under our Constitution. We concur that an efficient system of education must have as its goal to provide each and every child with at least the 7 following capacities. This is the law of the Commonwealth, ladies and gentlemen. One of those 7 capacities, which number 5, by the way, is sufficient grounding in the arts to enable each student to appreciate his or her cultural or historic heritage. And I believe that we continue to give arts the short shrift. The Rose decision goes on to say the essential and minimal characteristics, of an efficient system of common schools have to be summarized as an adequate education in which an adequate education is one which has at its goal the development of the 7 capacities. And so I just want us to understand that my interpretation of the Rose decision is arts should be treated just as we talk about sufficient oral and written communication skills, as we talk about social and economic, political systems, all of those things. The Rose decision says sufficient grounding in the arts is one of those 7 capacities we have to have. And I don't think we've ever lived up to that one.
And I would agree that we need to make sure that kids have that grounding, and I want to make sure we do that in an appropriate way and not in an artificial way. And I feel like if we had gone forward with this particular aspect, I actually think it would have hurt the arts more so than actually have promoted it. And so I'm all with you. I think that's a great point to bring up, and I think that as we move forward, we're going to be able to do that.
Mr. Commissioner, I think we need to look across the state and see where, if that is even taking place, that there's arts education at any level. I suspect there are many places in this Commonwealth where that arts education is treated as the throwaway because you have short funding.
I would say that you're probably right. We need to take a look at that. And one of the things that I have on my plan of things to do is, and again, this is before we get started with the new accountability system, but we're going to create a series of awards for schools and school districts that promote the things that are important about a well-rounded education, and one of those will be the arts.
I would add, too, just from a legal perspective, obviously the Rose decision is controlling, but the General Assembly went on to take that language from the Rose decision and place it in statute.
Yeah.
So you have, obviously, the Rose decision is case law, but it's in 158-6451, those 7 elements and some additional requirements.
And that's where I think the one committee in particular that's going to help us look for the unintended consequences in an accountability system will be a help. We will ensure that we have adequate representation of all those communities, including the visual and performing arts on that committee, to ensure that we do our very best for our kids to get all of those, all the grounding they need.
Just one last comment. Since Kate Akers is here, it's good. The KSU's put out a report about 1.5 years, 2 years ago that in Kentucky, a high school diploma only guarantees you less than poverty wages no matter what. The average, high school diploma graduate 3 years later is making $11,000. So, point is that if you're going to give credit for certifications, it really needs to be ones that have some market piece.
Agreed.
So there are a number besides arts that are in that category too that we should be looking at.
Well, and again, I think this is the opportunity we have, is to look, because frankly, I want to make sure our diploma is good enough to get people above the poverty line too. So, go to the next.
Yeah, anyone else have any questions about that topic?
We had a request for me to do a quick update